North American Jews and Israeli Jews.
Great, thank you. A wish of tolerance and understanding between North American Jews and Israeli Jews. Any other wishes for Israel on the 70th? Yes, Jackie.
I wish that we could follow some of the things that we heard in the video that we're going to discuss tonight, because it kind of scared me when it said that the diversity in the United States was going to affect the Jewish community. And I hope that that can be worked out and that we could follow some of the suggestions in the video that we did see.
Great, so we can yep, David.
More peace treaties like the Abraham Accords, which should be getting all of the praise from everyone in this room.
Great. So more peace treaties with neighbors, and definitely we want to acknowledge that, and those are big momentous deals with perhaps people we did not see that there was possible peace with. Beautiful. Any other wishes for the birthday? Annette, Arani, and then Annette.
I would wish for recognition and acceptance with the body of world nations, that it is a nation to be recognized and accepted as all others.
Beautiful, so Ronnie, right? And acknowledging that, not putting Israel on a different level than other countries, right? And not singling
Well
it out,
said.
right? Beautiful, Ronnie, thank
Well
you. Nice
said.
wish. Annette, you have a nice wish?
Yes, I wish for a peaceful two-state solution.
Okay, a peaceful two-state solution. I'm going to wish for beautiful sunny days in Israel, as well as water that they would not have to worry, and that's good weather. I think not all of our while we're going to talk about serious stuff, not all of our wishes have to be as serious, but I think that we follow some of Israel's leads on COVID-19. I just read this afternoon that they are not going to require masks outside of Israel starting on Sunday, which is a big thing, and that they've been able to really contain COVID-19, and so I think that's a model for us, and hopefully that I will get to go to Israel as soon as possible. Any other wishes that people want to begin with? So today we are going to talk about anti-Semitism. And we are going to start by looking at some text, and then ground us in Jewish in our conversation. There are ancient Jewish texts, not about anti-Semitism, but about how we disagree and how we agree. And then we will go into the contemporary conversations about what we watched the video. So there was two parts of the video. The first part was a conversation by Danielle Hartman, who talked about the challenge of anti-Semitism, but also pluralism, tolerance, and deviance. And what are those three different things? And we're going to dig into that to begin with. And then there was a conversation with two scholars and people who are working with Jewish students as well as Jewish communities. One on a college campus, and Danielle Hartman has a conversation with him about and Dr. Bitton about anti-Semitism, and on a practical level, how does it look on college campuses and throughout our country? And I think when we discuss anti-Semitism, Hartman's whole idea was anti-Semitism was never a challenge to Jewish peoplehood. Anti-Semitism brought us together. Anti-Semitism was the thing that we were able to build around. But since recently, anti-Semitism has kind of ceased to play that role. Anti-Semitism has divided the Jewish people. It used to bring us together. It's the reason why many of these organizations were founded in the first place. Anti-Defamation League, AJC, all these places to combat anti-Semitism, bring us together. They are still combating anti-Semitism, but we don't see them as eye to eye. People's reactions, depending on what someone says or what someone else has said, it's a dividing force. And that is something that we are going to really analyze. So that was Danielle Hartman's basic thesis for his study, and I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna study a little text. And he talks about three things: pluralism, tolerance, and deviance. So can someone define pluralism for me? What was, if anyone remembers, what was pluralism? Yeah, Eugene?
Plural, I'm sorry, it didn't respond as it should. Pluralism is acceptance of different variations of the same thing, no, similar things, or almost the same thing, because different people accept it different way. Here I was talking about anti-Semitism, and what is anti-Semitism, how to accept it in relation to different other events and actions of people and so on, and politics and different things, to accept it different way, not to accept it different way.
Right. So I'm going to share. So I'm going to share my screen. And so here's a text about pluralism. Can someone read this Babylonian Talmud text? This is a famous text. You might have studied it before. Rabbi Abba. Someone else who hasn't read yet?
I'll read.
Okay.
Our Abba stated in the name of Samuel.
R means it's
Rabbi. Sorry.
Sorry.
Rabbi Abba stated in the name of Samuel. For 3 years, there was a dispute between Beth Shammai and Beth Hillel, the former asserting the halacha is in agreement with our views, and the latter contending the halacha is in agreement with our views. Then a Bachol issued announcing the utterance of both are the words of the living God, but the halacha is in agreement with the rulings of Beth Hillel.
All right, let's stop there for a second. Okay, so we have Rabbi Abba stated the name of Shmuel. So it's a retelling of a story, and this is a text that emphasizes pluralism. And so there's a debate between the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai. And a bat kol, like the voice of God, comes issued then announcing the utterance of both are the words of the living God. But the halacha is in agreement with the rulings of Beit Hillel, the house of Hillel. So why is this a text that highlights pluralism?
The fact that you can have a disagreement about how you disagree, I think. And it reflects that there can be many ideas, but then you can accept the fact that they both have some validity in discussing the ideas.
Exactly. So both of these people, both of these houses have facts, have opinions, and both are the words of the living God. There is no hierarchy over one or the other. Pluralism is, I might not agree with your opinion,
Right.
but my opinion's not better than yours, right? We are both of equal value. So can someone give me an example of pluralism in that sense? It doesn't have to be anti-Semitism, not about anti-Semitism. It can be about anything. What's an example of that?
Well, we can celebrate holidays. We can celebrate our holiday, but we can appreciate a Christian's holiday, Christmas and Hanukkah at the same time. That we have different opinions, but we, appreciate the others.
Beautiful reason. Beautiful. Right. A good example also in the Jewish world. I'm a Reformed Jew. I celebrate 7 days of Passover because I follow the sun. I'm sorry, not the sun. I follow the moon, and I know when there's the full moon, so I know when the 7 days of Passover are. My conservative colleague, or my wife, Ariel, she says we celebrate 8 days of Passover. And 8 days of Passover, why? Because it's tradition. That's what we are living outside of Israel. That's something we do. Both are correct. I might think I'm right, but there's no hierarchy there. That's pluralism. However, this is an interesting text because it goes even further. Helene, you were sorry.
Rabbi, excuse me, but it seems to me that people who hold both views have to accept that same
Right.
basic premise. Otherwise, it becomes either tolerance or
Exactly. So this is that, Gene, I think you're really putting a key point, right? This is, I can feel pluralistic, and sometimes, I think, but it has to go both ways. And sometimes, perhaps, oh yeah, I understand, and I think that your value is of the same level as mine. But do we really know that what that other person thinks? I think it's only for, you can only look at for what you believe, right? You can only say, this is how I feel.
But isn't that freedom of religion?
Well, it's freedom of religion, but it's more than freedom of religion. It's the idea that I'm not holding my religion over someone else's.
Okay.
Mine's of equal religion. It's not just you can practice any way you want, but when we get into tolerance, we're going to kind of think about that a little bit more. But I think the way we practice is equal. The way we celebrate holidays is equal. The way we think about anti-Semitism, that we both believe that this is wrong, we both come from the same place, is equal. And we're going to get into that a little bit more. But Helene, can you read just the next paragraph for me?
Since, however, both are the words of the living God, what was it that entitled Beth Hillel to have the halacha fixed in agreement with their rulings? Because they were kindly and modest, they studied their own rulings and those of Beth Shammai, and were even so humble as to mention the actions of Beth Shammai before theirs.
All right, so it's right. If they were equal, then why would Beth Hillel win? If this is a pluralistic text, why did Beth Hillel win?
He was more tolerant.
They were more tolerant. It wasn't because of their decision making, right? It's not because of their reasoning. But Carol, what were you saying?
Because they were more tolerant of the other person's view.
Exactly. It was this idea, it was no hierarchy over the reasoning, but the idea that another group was treated better. It was the culture of Beth Hillel, the house of Hillel, compared to the culture of house of Shammai.
But they also studied each other's.
Oh, yes, good. Nice.
That's an intense part of all the arguments of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, that there was an investigation of both sides, like weighing the scales.
And I think that's a really good important part of pluralism. We understand why that a person celebrates the holiday this way. We understand why they think this way. We understand, and that is what pluralism is about, understanding where that other person's coming from. And so that way I can see that my tradition is equal. So here's a text about tolerance. Can someone, it's a little longer, can someone read this one for me? This is a famous text as well, you might have studied it.
I'll read it. Mishnah, Bet Shammai say, in the evening, every man should recline and recite the Shema, and in the morning he should stand, as it says, and when thou liest down and when thou risest up. Bet Hillel, however, say that every man should recite in his own way, as it says, and when thou walkest by the way. Why then is it said, and when thou liest down and when thou risest up? This means at the time when people lie down and at the time when people rise up. Rabbi Tarfon said, I was once walking by the way, and I reclined to recite the Shema in the manner prescribed by Bet Shammai, and I incurred danger from robbers. They said to him, you deserve to come to harm because you acted against the opinion of Bet Hillel.
All right, so this is an example of tolerance. So we say the Shema, right? When you should recline and recite. So there's a debate between how you should say the Shema. Should you say the Shema standing up, or should you say the Shema sitting down or lying down? And Shammai says you should say in the morning when you're lying, you should say the Shema in the morning lying down, because that's what you do when you're lying down. And in the evening, you should say it when you're rising up. So you say Shema when you're standing up. But Beit Hillel says you should do it any way you want. You should stand up or you should sit down. It's your choice. And so where's the debate here? The tolerance comes in here when, all right, you follow Beit Shammai and you got robbed. You were lying down in the middle of the street saying Shema, and they see, these robbers see you lying down, that you're vulnerable. Of course, they're going to come and grab you in the middle of when you're saying the Shema. And it's Shema and its blessing. So it's not just the Shema that we know of the first line. It's Shema and its blessing. So it's a long time. So these robbers grab you when you're vulnerable. You can have your opinion. I tolerate your opinion, but you're wrong. Tolerance defined would be there's a hierarchy. I think my opinion's better than yours. I'm still willing to tolerate your answer, but you became an easy target when you were lying down, and your position there, that's why my opinion's better than yours. And because you didn't follow Beit Hillel, perhaps you need to be punished. You need to follow the right way.
That seems entirely intolerant. that you'll be punished because you know.
Right, but it's not saying you can't do it. It's just not the right thing. Right?
You're going to be harmed if you do it. You're going to be harmed.
Well, maybe it's not being punished, but if something bad happens, you earned it. You deserved it.
Yeah, this is your opinion. You didn't have to walk down the street.
I don't think you deserve it. I think it's simply proof that your opinion is wrong.
That wouldn't be tolerance.
Well, that's no, it is tolerance. It's a live and let live. You want to live by your belief, go ahead and live by your belief because it doesn't affect me. But if something bad happens, it is proof that what you were doing was wrong.
Right.
And you deserved it? That's
No, I'm not saying
but that's what he said here.
I'm not saying you deserved it. I'm just saying
that's what it says here, and you deserved.
Right. Yeah, but this is how you followed it. It's not the way that you could have done it. Right? You could have done it differently.
Doesn't affect me.
Can I ask a question that takes us away from tolerance versus pluralism?
Sure. Yeah.
I read this particular parsha as being said, like, say the Shema is the last thing you do while you're awake, as you're laying down, and you say it as the first thing you do when you get up in the morning, and it has nothing to do with how you do it. I think it's more a question of when you do it.
Perhaps that too, right? But the question is, like, should you get up out of your bed before you say the Shema? That's what they're kind of saying. But if you're camping, right, and you're woken up after a long traveling, you could get up, and if you look around and you say it's unsafe to say it lying down, and I'm going to say it standing up, a little bit like that. All right. So just read a little bit more on this text. Rabbi Ezekiel learned.
You want me to read from more? Okay. Rabbi Ezekiel learned, if one follows the rule of Bet Shammai, he does right. If one follows the rule of Bet Hillel, he does right. Rabbi Joseph said, if he follows the rule of Bet Shammai, his action is worthless.
Okay, keep it, and then we'll read this at the end here. Sorry.
You want me to read more?
Yeah, just the last paragraph.
Okay.
Yep.
Rabbi Nachum ben Isaac said, one who follows the rule of Bet Shammai makes his life forfeit, as we have learned. Rabbi Tarfon said, I was once walking by the way and I reclined to recite the Shema in the manner prescribed by Bet Shammai, and I incurred danger from robbers. They said to him, you deserve to come to harm because you acted against the opinion of it.
Right. So here, like, Shammai is a little deviant, right? Shammai is a difference that we can tolerate a little bit. And this is where it gets into the anti-Semitism a little bit, right? And this is where Hartman kind of shares his beliefs, right? So can I agree with Steve Bannon, who might have some challenges that I have, but I really like his opinion on Israel or something like that. Can I tolerate that? Or can I look at Ilan Omar and I'm uncomfortable with some of the things that she says, but I agree on her opinion on raising the minimum wage to 15. Are we able, or the Women's March, right? I believe in gender equality, but there's people in the Women's March that I'm challenged by. I don't believe in their rhetoric. I believe that they have anti-Semitic tropes. So what do I do? Am I tolerant? Like, is there, where do I draw the line? And that's where we're going to get into a little bit more in just a moment. Let's define deviance even more. All right. Can someone read this last text? We're going to do 3 texts today.
Me, I'll do it. Can you hear me?
Sure, thank you. Yeah.
One should accept sacrifices from the transgressors in Israel so that they may be inclined to repent, but not from an Israeli mishamad or from one who offers a wine libation to idols.
Mishamad, sorry, just it's like someone who destroys Judaism.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
An Israelite who kind of destroys Judaism. Yeah.
Okay. An Israel, anti-Semitic Israel, no. Or from one who offers a wine libation to idols, or from one who profanes the Sabbath publicly. Now this barathai is self.
It's a bright, now this bright side, it's like it's the a section of Talmud. So this, yeah.
Okay, it's self-contradictory. It says, all of you, but not all of you, thus excluding a mishamad. And then it says, one may accept sacrifices from the transgressors of Israel. This is no difficulty. The former statement refers to one who is opposed to the whole Torah, while the latter statement refers to one who is opposed to one particular law.
All right, so deviance is the idea that I can't tolerate you. I have a difference with you that I just can't tolerate. However, we look at this text and we have 4 different categories, right? We have transgressors. We have a one who destroys our tradition. We have idlers, and we have someone that publicly desecrates Shabbat. So we have these 4 categories, and they want to offer a sacrifice. According to this text, who can you, of these 4 categories, which of these categories can you accept the sacrifice from?
The transgressors.
The transgressors. You can accept this sacrifice from a regular sinner, right? We have 613 commandments in the Torah. They might, right? They might reject a couple of those commandments, but why are we able to accept from the transgressors if they break a rule of the Torah, but not from these other people?
Because if you just break one law, one part of it, it does not mean you're not following other parts. And so then it's a matter of degree. Whereas the one who desecrates the Shabbat is throwing the whole thing out.
Right, in public and in public.
In public.
Right,
so
the one
you can't forgive that because there's no hope for that person.
Right, you've exited the system in totality. You've gotten rid of Judaism. You don't believe in this. But a transgressor, and maybe does it on purpose, they haven't rejected the entire tradition. So in deviance, there's an aspect where there's different levels, right? There might be tolerable deviance, and Hartman talks about this, and intolerable deviance, right? An example of this, he says, is driving. Right, you might be driving 85 miles in like a 40 mile per hour speed limit. That's deviant. Is that tolerable? Yeah. Even the police believe that. Right? You don't get arrested. You get a ticket, but you are let on your way. If someone is driving under the influence, that is intolerable. You're arrested. You're taken off the road immediately. That's deviant as well, but we have a limit. And so we have these three categories. We have pluralistic, we have tolerable, and we have deviance. And those conversations are something we need to talk about as we talk about anti-Semitism in our world. Because what is our red line? Where do we say, yes, we can be in conversation with these people? Or where do we say, no, we can't be in these conversations? And that was what Hartman kind of started us to think about.
Rabbi, I have a question. Was that
Please,
like the
yes.
anti-Semitism but type of argument that he was making?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So yes, but, right? So Stephen Miller. Oh, no, not a great example. I'm trying. So right. So there's a yes, but, right? Oh, let's take the Women's March. This is the yes, but they say they tweet something that seems very anti-Semitic, that Jews have a lot of power, that Jews have the money. They're right. They haven't they didn't acknowledge, when they acknowledged Yom HaShoah last week, they didn't acknowledge that Jews were the ones who were murdered. Right? In the tweet, they didn't say many souls were murdered. It didn't say Jews. It's Yom HaShoah, it's a Holocaust Remembrance Day. Call out Judaism. Was that anti-Semitic that they didn't? Perhaps. But I agree with their policies on some domestic policies that I really am passionate about. Yes, but yeah, they might be anti-Semitic, but I feel confident that they are going to help the poor in my community, or they have really good things about food insecurity, and I support them. Can I sit at the same table with this person? What's our red line? Or on the other hand, right? Steve Bannon, right? Definitely perhaps said some anti-Semitic incidents, but his policy, they're pro-Israel, right? They are good for the Jewish people. They are doing strong things, and I support that. Can I sit at the same table with him? Yes, but, right? That's our yes, but. Does anyone have an example of that in their life that they can share with me? Or an idea to illustrate that more?
It's not my life, but my Israeli cousin would watch 700 and was very close friends with a lot of the evangelist preachers. And I said, Jesse, I don't understand how you can follow them. And he said, they give us money. They believe in Israel. They send their loads of tourists. And so I just look the other way and I take what I can for them. And that was
so
yes,
I'm tolerable. Something's rubbing me the wrong way. But they're supporting me. They're supporting some of my values, and that's important. So can I sit at their table? Anyone else have another example of that?
It was cited during the video, which that a significant amount of American Jews overlooked a lot of Trump's faults because he was so strong, in their view, for Israel. And they were willing to put up with the rest because Israel was at a higher level of concern.
Absolutely, right? Or having conversations with individuals, or right? Or the way that he might not have called out certain Charlottesville things, but we know but look at his actions. He's not anti-Semitic. Look at his actions. He's supporting Israel. Look at these deals that he was able to make that no other president has made yet. I understand that. There is right? So yes, but there's a good example, right?
Yeah, I would say the Women's March, right after the inauguration, 100%. Trump's inauguration, very important to me. Did I like some of the people who organized it? No, but I felt very strongly about women's issues and other democratic issues.
Right, reproductive rights is so important, right? And so while I'm not I'm struggling with their reactions, but I need to be at that march because what they're marching for is what is so important. And maybe do we give some of these individuals a pathway or to say these anti-Semitic remarks? And so where is our red line, right? Where do we see, what is our red line now, right? And, or I look at people and say, how can you be doing that? How can you be agreeing with this person, right? Or from the right or the left, Jews have now, because of anti-Semitic incidents on each side, we are now against each other. This used to bring us together. When we saw someone tweet about this, we would come together and coalesce around something. Here's a perfect example. Westfield High School had a speaker. He started to speak about Israel. Sorry, I'll take a step back. He was a graduate of Westfield High School, an African-American, talking about his life growing up in Westfield and how he became a wrestler, how he went to Iowa, how he won an Olympic medal, some of the challenges that he's faced as a Black individual in the public schools of Westfield, and his story and how race has affected him. He then went on a kind of a tirade about everything that was political. I haven't seen the video or anything like that, but he made a statement that basically Israel was an apartheid state. Can I sit with that individual, even if I agree with his other conversations, even if I agree with that there are other things that we need to articulate better? Can I sit with him, even if I don't agree with that? Even if I think that's an anti-Semitic statement, right? That he calls out just one country that does a certain thing. What can we do? Yes, but where's our red line? Where do I have that conversation? Yes, Gene.
I think we're too quick to equate an anti-Israel policy with anti-Semitism. And I think we're too quick to tolerate the but-for example is given by Hartman. Let's use Trump. To use the but-for, one, assumes that his policies were pro-Israel and that no other politicians in his place would have been as pro-Israel. But the but-for that we're excusing lifted a rock that let out all of this venomous anti-Semitism, white power stuff. Does that support of Israel? Let's, for the sake of this discussion, let's accept that he was pro-Israel and that no other politician would have been as pro-Israel.
Right.
Does lifting up that rock, does the pro-Israel excuse that? To me, there's a red line there. It's for me, it's almost like saying, yeah, what Hitler did to the Jews was not so terrific, but he was great for the economy. You know, there's some, I don't want to take it to that extreme, but
that is some extreme.
Yeah, I would like to go on, David. You were going to say something? No. I would like to turn that around, Gene. I think that there's a difference between being critical of Israel and being anti-Israel. And being anti-Israel, meaning that Israel should not be treated like other nations or should not exist, is anti-Semitic. It's the only Jewish state in the world. And if you basically question the validity of that state, to me, that's blatant anti-Semitism.
Well, I think, right. I think it's and if it's the only place that you call out.
I
Right.
don't,
So
I
there,
don't disagree. I don't
I think that
disagree.
goes back to Ronnie's, I think that goes back a little to Ronnie's blessing for Israel, right? When you are only calling out the one Jewish state, the one majority country in the entire world, without calling out other countries that are doing terrible things to their own people, then that's anti-Semitism. Yeah, maybe Gene, you can push back. I'm happy.
No, that's a lot of what's the expression I'm using? But what about? That's the what about kind of response. It doesn't make what Israel is doing right. It's pointing to other countries that are doing the same wrong thing.
Right.
And I'm not.
But you could be, but I wonder if you could be critical, and maybe this is the yes but a little bit, right?
Maybe.
We could be critical. So where is our? So the conversation goes like, where is our red line?
Oh,
Like,
I don't accept that Israel's doing something wrong. I mean, why do we go on the assumption Israel's wrong?
Well,
I think
how many times do we try and have peace with those people? And why do those people pay tribute to everyone who kills a Jew? How would you like to negotiate with them?
Well, I think there's also an aspect of, as Jews, we are a light unto the nation. All right. And so what are some of the policies that we need to do? And I don't want to get into exactly all the policies, but when we say people are calling out Israel for certain things and not calling out other countries for what they are doing, then there's anti-Semitism there. That's where I see it. But what is our red line with our, do we have red lines?
I think it's very individual. I don't think if the red line for David is the same as the red line for me. I think it's very, very individualized.
So then you think, sorry, Gail, sorry, please go.
I think that to be specific to the instance that you raised of the young man who was speaking before an audience about his experience growing up as a Black student in Westfield. I think that the question is not one of policy, but we're talking about his degree of anti-Semitism. And if his conversation was about his general experience as related specifically to him as a young man in this town, and decided to call Israel out for its politics, that was beyond his charge. And to me, that seems to say that he was looking for an opportunity to make an anti-Semitic comment to an audience that was there to listen to him. I think if the comment was inappropriate, the comment was anti-Semitic, and it's a comment for which he should have been called out in that context.
Right. So, and so it's the reaction when we hear other things as well, right? So what is the school's reaction? How do we react when we hear this too? It is an opportunity to sit down, right? I believe that actually, that while it's deviant, it gives us the opportunity to have a conversation. And that's why I think when I might disagree with a policy of or opinions of a leader of an organization, I want to be at that table with them. I might agree with about their decisions about affordable housing, but I might not agree with their statements on Jews. But I want to be on the table so I can be in conversation with them. If I'm not there, if I wave my hands and say, oh, I can't be a part of you, there's never going to be a conversation. Let me tell you, let me tell you why I believe that what you just said was anti-Semitic and why that impacted me. And that's so I don't want my red line to be if one person says something that's, I want to be able to have that conversation with that individual. That's I don't know where my red line is. Gene, I heard a little bit when you bring up when there's violence, right? When maybe it's violent, or when you align yourself with white supremacists or other groups, or when you say when you're a professor and says that Israel does not have a right to exist on a college campus, maybe that's my red line. Maybe I can't take a class with you.
And the other point that has to be that can't be overlooked with when you talk about the Trumpites in Israel and evangelical support of Israel. Why do they support Israel? Because they see it as a prelude to the coming of
Right, they want all
The Messiah.
and then
all
all
the
the
Jews
Jews will be killed or
Right.
convert.
So-
So
So I want to go
that's
back.
not anti-Semitic. I don't know what is.
Right. So I want to go back to Jackie's question, a point. Our red lines are all different.
Mhm.
So according to Hartman, is there any way for anti-Semitism to bind us as the Jewish people like it has before? Is there any way that we can come back, that we can all have a same definition? Or is anti-Semitism now too polarizing? Is it something that we just can't agree on anymore? Which is a pretty mind-boggling experience, that we can't agree on what is anti-Semitism, or we can't agree on how we relate to anti-Semitism. That's not going to help Jewish people. So what do we do? How do we have that? How do we have those conversations?
We just keep talking, because I have a few Republican friends. I have more than a few, but a few of them who are very persistent in emailing me articles that, are so right-wing. And I would then say, yes, I read it, and here's what I feel. And I'd send them something back by Thomas Friedman or something. And finally, I finally said, we've been friends since college and I cherish it. Let's just agree we see things differently. I mean, it was just getting to be too burdened.
Right. So how do we become more tolerant? Right. I don't think, because Phyllis, what I'm hearing is you're never going to say your opinion is lesser than your friend's opinion.
Not in that.
But can we both believe, though, that we both believe and we cherish that the idea of Israel is important, right? Israel needs to be a Jewish homeland, and we both agree to that. We might disagree on how we see it. We might disagree on this is how I think it should be going, or this is how you should be going. But our opinions come from the idea that we both want Israel to shine. We want Israel to flourish. If we come from that perspective and calling that out and why we might disagree on the way it goes, that's where we're coming from. I can't have a conversation with you if you believe that Israel should be X. That's not, if you believe that, then I think that's deviant. But if we come in from the same conclusion of what our ultimate goal of Israel is, then maybe we can tolerate our different opinions. I still think my opinions are better than yours, but I don't. Do we have those conversations? Have you had those conversations with people?
I don't really have a conversation because I'm not argumentative. When she starts, I just say, it's usually at lunch. Here's the check. Bye. See you in a month. But that's how I do it. I don't argue. But emailing, we can go back and forth until I said, I think we have to agree. We see it differently. And it wasn't.
Okay.
It was about.
Well, I also say never email. That's another one thing. If you want to have a conversation.
It was about Black Lives Matter. It was about Black Lives Matter. It was about a lot of domestic issues.
Right. Yeah. Other thoughts about what you heard from Hartman, either from the conversation that he had, the lecture that he had by himself, or with the conversation that he had with those two professionals? Yeah, Eugene.
Yeah, I'm sorry it doesn't respond quickly what device that I'm using today. So there was little delay. First, I wanted to say, for example, let's take that young man that was speaking at Westfield High School. And what he said, definitely it is very wrong, it is very bad. But at the same time, I would start looking at why did he say so. Maybe he's really anti-Semitic, very, very possibly. But at the same time, he could be just not understanding what does this word mean correctly, completely. And he saw it somewhere, some people say so, and he repeated that. Therefore, I would try, very likely I would try, if I'm interested in, no, maybe not necessarily in him directly, but in the impact of his words on the audience, high school is important audience, I would start looking at that, and maybe it would be good to ask him questions about that to try to figure out.
Right.
And either to respond that no, it is anti-Semitic, or to explain him what it means, because it's very important. And it is about that. Now, Trump was raised, his name was raised already a few times today in our meeting. When 5 years ago, when there were two major candidates for president, Trump and Hillary Clinton, first, what I found out about them, I was interested in their attitude towards Jews. It's for me, no, I think not only for me, it's very important. What I found out, each of them have their children married to a Jew, both of them. From this point, knowing about that, I decided that very likely they are, no, at least not generally, not mostly anti-Semitic, both of them. Now, when Trump became president, for me, it was very important. When Trump became president, generally, I was looking at what he did for Israel, that relations with major Arab countries that never were established before Trump. It's very, very important. Now, what Jim mentioned, that he is about his support for far right. He supports the right. I cannot say to what degree support. I don't want to go now into that. And therefore, I have a question.
Eugene, I want to make sure that everyone has a chance. We don't have that much time, so I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance to share. Okay.
Okay.
Yep. But thank you. Right. I think what you said though about like really asking like, what do you mean by that, or like the clarifying questions helps us figure out, is that the red line that to that person cross a red line that I just can't sit down with them, or that to that organization do something that I just can't align with anymore. I can't tolerate them at all. And so they are deviant. One of the big organizations like that is Jewish Voices for Peace. Who's heard of Jewish Voices for Peace? Anyone else heard of Jewish Voices for Peace? Yeah, Carol, you want to share?
Well, my understanding is that they are not a pro-Israel group, that they actually do not believe in the right of Israel to have a state.
Right, there's the debate about that a little bit, but they're very big on Jewish campuses. While they don't believe perhaps a one-state solution, that actually Israel, we don't need a Jewish homeland. We need a homeland for people, and Jews should live in Israel. And so, but they're Jewish voices. They have practiced their Judaism, and that's why it's so can I sit down? Going back to our texts, are they an organization that I can be with? Are they still in the Jewish fold, right? Are they of those transgressors? If they're following other things and practicing my Judaism, but don't believe in a state of Israel, or don't believe in perhaps a Jewish homeland, or is that something that I can agree with?
Well, there are Hasidic who are in Israel who don't believe in a Jewish homeland.
100% too, right? So there you go, right? There's on the other side. So how do I navigate this? It's a challenge. I do believe it's unfortunate that anti-Semitism has pulled us apart. And we should be a community that when we hear anti-Semitic trope, if it's on the right, if it's on the left, if it's not even a political statement from someone else, we should be coming out and saying, this is what, as one community, and I don't think we are doing that. And I think some organizations are trying to do that and bringing us together so we can make those statements, but unfortunately, we we say yes, but actually this is not, but it's not something we really, I can ignore that. Debbie, I saw your hand.
Ethan, many years ago, we invited J Street speakers. The Tikkun Olam group did not believe in what they had stood for and felt, though, that we had an obligation to have them come and speak their piece. And it was difficult. It really was. It was, but we were glad in the end after they came for dinner and for the Shabbat program. In the end, we were very glad that we had given them, a platform for people to understand. And
right.
But it was, but there was a big but all along.
As long as we don't give it to them again.
Well, David, I think that's a challenge, right? They believe in a two-state solution. They believe in these things, right? But we might disagree with the way that they believe in the state of Israel should be.
But their founders were so flawed. Soros wanted an alternative to AIPAC. Soros is a Jew who hates Israel. Soros is a billionaire who hasn't given a penny to Israel.
David, this is the whole. But David, this is the whole thing, right? So but if we come from a place where we believe that this organization wants the best for Israel, that this organization wants the best for Israel, can we hear them? Yep. I think. And this is where, unfortunately, it has divided us. Israel should be a unifying place. Anti-Semitism should be a unifying experience, like after the Holocaust, or unfortunately after the Pittsburgh shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We were unified as a Jewish community after the Pittsburgh shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Every single Jewish organization, every single synagogue, no matter where, no matter where you were on the religious spectrum, we were unified behind that. People showed up to synagogue. People lit candles. It's unfortunate that you have to feel Jewish peoplehood at that moment.
That's what I was thinking about when you were talking, Rabbi. It seems sad that the time we become united against anti-Semitism is when Jews are killed.
Mhm, that's right.
But at other times, we seem to be all over the place on how we want to deal with it. And, some of us are old enough to know when we were growing up that Jews couldn't work in certain law firms, that couldn't work at certain banks. That was clearly anti-Semitism. But now we live in a situation where in America, Jews are doing pretty well, maybe very well. And so now it seems to me that a lot of the anti-Semitism debate centers around Israel, and less about what Jews are experiencing in the United States. Now, it's different in France, where if you walk down the street with a kippah, you're going to get beat up, okay, or elsewhere, okay, but not here. So I think it's hard, and that's why we're always talking about Israel and whether or not someone who criticism of Israel calls into question its very existence is tolerable in terms of beyond the I don't want to talk to that person, okay, because the destruction of the Jewish state is not something I want to negotiate about.
Right.
So
I think Hartman, he concludes by saying, like, if we understand this changing context within which anti-Semitism is functioning today,
Right.
and couple it with a greater responsibility and care in the application of the category, we can mitigate its consequence. Anti-Semitism should not be dividing us.
Right.
Mhm.
Right? We need to look at, and we need to understand how it's functioning. We need to have these conversations. We need to sit down and say, this is how I'm feeling, or this is what I'm hearing. But I think we can, perhaps while we may have different red lines, maybe our red lines could be a little closer together.
Yeah.
See, even though I'm going to say something and Gene could disagree, even though Gene and I just disagreed about an issue, I think he and I could sit down and agree what anti-Semitism is, okay? But the difference is then how do you deal with the different aspects of it? And that's the tough question.
Right. And I think it's even tougher when you have Israelis and North American Jews together. Right? I think that makes it even harder.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I was going to ask the question, is anti-Semitism like pornography? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
Good way.
Well, we don't, but I don't even think that's true now.
You know, can we?
Right? I don't know if people say, you can't define anti-Semitism, but you know when you see it. But when someone said, is it like, so that's not anti-Semitism.
But well, I think though, I don't know if you can make a distinction between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. That's
probably that's next week's conversation, probably.
Okay, because I think in many quarters, I think among Jews, the idea of anti-Semitism as a humanitarian question, getting the Jews out of Russia, supporting, the Falasha in Israel, that kind of thing. That's not a divisive question. But Israel is a Jewish state, but it's a political entity. And just like you have Republican Jews and Democratic Jews, people's views on the politics of it are the point of division. I think sometimes we have to remember what the cliche, but that there are more things that unite us than divide us, that our common history, the history surrounding the Holocaust, where we all came from, which was in large part not the Middle East, but the experiences that we share, that our parents shared, that our great-grandparents shared, the experiences of the shtetl and the life in Eastern Europe are all things that we can gather around. We may disagree about, how you make chicken soup or what's the appropriate way to celebrate a holiday, but those are the uniting issues. The issues around Israel they come in a different shell.
Yeah.
I think, I think one of the big problems, as you were talking about the Israelis and the American Jew, is that not all, but most Israelis that I've encountered, and I've encountered a lot of them, if you do not say Israel is the most important thing and you vote for the candidate in our country who's going to be pro-Israel, then you're not a good Jew. You're not a good Jew if you don't go along with that. That's a real division between the Israeli Jew and the American Jew.
Right.
I'd like to take this sort of sideways a little bit, because in the film they were talking about college campuses too, and if you look at millennials, you look at Generation Zs, so our younger. I mean, I speak to some of our kids who are now millennials who are working for organizations that I'm not saying that the organizations are anti-Israel, but they're surely, putting Israel under a microscope. And I wonder, and everyone knows, I've been teaching in synagogues my whole life, but I look at our kids and I say, how prepared are they? They look at Israel and they say, Israel wasn't giving the Palestinians the vaccines. No, that's not true, but they don't go any further than this bite that's out there. Well, Israel has not been doing this, and this is not to the Palestinians, and they're an apartheid country. And this is what I'm hearing from the Jewish ones. Forget about my the non-Jewish students out there. Right. But we're everyone on this call is of a certain age group, and I look and I say, well, 20 years from now, 25 years from now, who's going to be out there supporting Israel?
Mm.
What are we doing to equip them? Because I can tell you, as a religious, as a Jewish educator, I'm one of the most hated people on the earth for parents who say, bar mitzvah prep, it's getting in the way of vacations and sports and theater. And, Jewish education is down to 1 or maybe 2 days a week, and bar mitzvah prep that might be even in transliteration. So how prepared, how loving are they to Israel in the first place? And I know there are some that are very connected, but it's
right.
The priority isn't even, well, let's go visit Israel on a trip. I know, Rabbi, you're trying to get that a higher priority in Westfield, but they're going to France and they're going to the islands and they have their homes in Florida and in Arizona.
Right.
What's gonna
so I think
what's gonna happen?
Right.
Ethan, could we get a recording of the BDS programs, the Stand With Us programs that we do with our 11th and 12th grade students and college students? Because that's something the temple is doing and is trying to combat this and give our students and parents come too.
Right. Right. So yeah. So I think we're actually next week the 10th through 12th graders are going to meet with Stand With Us to talk about BDS and college campuses. Right. How do you confront how do you confront a group when you go into the college center and there's they're reenacting a checkpoint? What do you say? How do you handle that? I think we need to give the skills, but we also need to give the opportunity for complex conversation, right? How often do we have these conversations that we did for just the past hour about what tolerance is about, what deviance is about? How do we sit down with someone? When do we agree with an organization when they share a statement that we just don't agree with? We don't have the tools. How do we build a love of Israel? Of course, I think a love of Israel is by going there, by seeing it, by talking not just about the challenging things that Israel faces, but the amazing things that Israel faces as well. And that's what we kind of said a little bit last week about how can we have two homes? How do we bring Israelis and North American Jews together to respect and tolerate each other? I don't know if all Israeli Jews tolerate us. I know not all Israeli Jews tolerate it, and not all North American Jews tolerate Israelis. I can tell you that for sure as well. But can we work towards tolerance and then to pluralism? Pluralism is a really hard thing. And I think what Jean said earlier is, I can say I am a pluralistic Jew. I agree, you can practice your Judaism any way you want. But I don't know if I always get that feeling back. Right? I say, I'm a pluralistic Jew, and I believe that if you believe in a state of Israel that should be a Jewish homeland for it, then we believe the same thing. But if your opinion is a little different about how you think the Jewish homeland should look, then that's where I start having a challenge. But can we see eye to eye on that goal? I think that's what Hartman shares. I think there's challenges on the college campuses, but we also know there's challenges not just on college campuses. And I think sometimes we focus too much on college campuses. Right? We always say, oh, do you know what's happening on college campuses? And that's what the Hillel executive director said, who Hartman was interviewing at Columbia. It's bad, but it's not so bad. Let's not like say the sky is not falling.
But I think waiting to the college campus, it's already too late. If they haven't reached some kind of real connection of feeling to the Jewish community, to Israel, and feeling that Jewish life is of some significance, then expecting, all this training at college is really absurd.
I agree. That's why we train hopefully our students, but we start training them in high school, right? And so if they decided, oh, I'm done with the bar mitzvah, like, okay, we could, like today, yeah, we had a nice Yom HaTzmaut celebration in our preschool, right? We can have nice Yom HaTzmaut celebrations for our but if they're not here after 13, where are we going from there?
Yeah.
But we'll have one more video from Hartman. I hope that I'm following the curriculum a little bit. I'm gonna pick. It's an 11-part series. We decided just to do 3. This is a test. We can always run other curriculum from Hartman and their studies. I think that their videos are clear. I think they are balanced. I thought this one was interesting that he had an afterword of his presentation. I don't know if people caught that before they went into the interview. He talked about like, yeah, he didn't want to play it safe.
Yes, I got
He
that.
wanted to make sure. He wanted to make sure that they had the difficult conversation and called out individuals, called out organizations. And playing it safe is not always the best way to deal with difficult conversations or conflict. We need to put everything on the table. And I think that's what Hartman did a little bit and highlighting some of those tensions that we face. Always, if there's suggestions for Hartman, you can always email me. I got an email about structuring this class a little differently. So I thank you. And we'll have one more video. If you're having troubles getting the videos, let me know, or let Jackie Grescott know, who sends out the videos. We can make sure that works. But the next video should be up by Monday or Tuesday of next week.
I think it's very high level. This Hartman program is a very high level. It's really excellent.
That's very high level, yes. And,
Yes.
and it's a nice text base with other things as well. So they do other great things. And so it's my first time. When I was in Israel, I've been to Hartman institutes and lectures. I never really have had a curriculum that really was kind of helped us discuss these things. So I'm looking forward to the last conversation we have, and then we can explore more. There's also ones that this one's more abstract, right? There's other ones that are more historical. Like, let's talk about the Six-Day War. Let's talk about the Yom Kippur War, a little bit more factual. We started one with that's a little bit more, there's no answers to this one. And maybe that's something we look into, or there's different tribes, like we can study the Orthodox and the Haredi in Israel. There's where we can study the Bedouins, or we can study the Druze. That's a little bit more historical or sociological than perhaps this one is.
Rabbi, can Jackie maybe send out all of the links to videos, because I couldn't get the first ones and people have said they can't get the second.
Sure, yeah, to make sure that the
maybe
ones
when
that
she
are sent
sends,
Can we
yeah, I
actually
can talk.
Can we actually get links to the other ones, the other programs, or is it just?
Yeah, I can try to get those videos for everyone.
That would be
Now,
wonderful.
if you go to their website, you have links to all of them.
Yeah, so they have. Oh, great, good. Thank you, David.
What did that?
So we
What
can
did you
have them
say,
on the website.
David?
David said they're on the website. I thought there was a special portal, but I make sure that I think this one's open to everyone, so we can make sure that you can have all of them as well.
Hello.
Happy 73rd birthday. Young,
Can I add
years
something
young to
quickly?
Israel.
Oh,
Please.
I highly recommend to everyone's enjoyment and pleasure listening to the recording of Cantor Ott's Israel music presentation she did this week. It is outstanding. It will cheer you up, warm your heart, and I can't say enough good words for it.
Yeah. It was really great. It was a fascinating music history of Israel, which was the founding of Israel. And this Sunday, if you're around, we would love for you to join us from 11 to 12 for a conversation with one of the top Israeli authors, Eshkol Nevo. It should be a really interesting conversation. It doesn't have to, if you have friends that are into Israel, or, please send the link around. We have a nice group of people, but we know it's a Sunday afternoon, Sunday late morning, which is starting to get nice out in April. And so it's hard, and we would rather be outside than on Zoom, but hoping that we can have a couple more people sign up. So if you know friends or are family members that are interested in Israeli authors, or just want to sit down with a really great Israeli creative writer, please send the link around and tell them to sign up.
realize that 10:45.
Yeah.
So the Historical Jewish Court of Budapest being offered to as a temple program.
Yeah, I think there was like a that's a Chamishim program. That's the individual.
Yes.
Yeah, this was booked, and because he's in Israel, and this is an opportunity that we don't always get. So I think that's a challenge.
This is Israel.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night. Shabbat shalom tomorrow.